do style points matter? Like, I know that style points don't matter in the standings.
Yeah.
I know they don't matter in the playoff run. All you got to do is win. But it feels like if they win this game ugly, it's not going to convince a lot of people they turn the corner. Will it convince John McMullen, though? What's up, John?
Hey, guys. How are you on this beautiful day?
It's funny. I was thinking today, I was outside. You know, Brian Dawkins, he always talks about Brian, as you know, John, is connected with the fan base more so than probably any athlete who's played in the city. And he always said he understood why Philadelphians could be so angry and grumpy. And he said, look at it around here. It's always gray. It's always cloudy. It's raining on a cold, late fall, early winter day. And if the team loses and you're got to go to work the next day, I mean, you're grumpy and lousy. He would always say that. And he really he gets it, John.
Yeah, I guess. But then how do you explain Seattle? I guess they're grungy. They're depressed. Yeah, I take
but they
that
got
back.
the sound. It's beautiful. I mean, it's the Pacific Northwest.
They embrace the rain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, because John, Ryan, and I have been talking about it. It's obviously important from a playoff standpoint, from a standings standpoint, for the Eagles to win this game, especially with Dallas losing this weekend, give them a little edge up there. But I've said that while style points don't normally matter, and I normally don't care, a win's a win, tonight I'm kind of looking for the Eagles to turn a corner. It's a bad team, an opponent that they routinely beat, a quarterback who hasn't played in 10 weeks. And I don't know, if they kind of give you this like 23-21 win, I'm not sure a lot of people are going to convince that they can do this for 4 straight weeks and then maybe even win a playoff game.
Doug called it a must-win. So
Well, yeah, he did. And it isn't any longer, by the way. Anything in the NFC East, I joked yesterday with the Redskins falling out of it finally. The only good things happen when you don't play in this division. But I don't think they're capable of garnering style points at this stage. And I don't think anyone will believe in them if they win 40-0, to tell you the truth, that they can go win 4. And both things I think are more of an issue with the New York Giants. I mean, that's just a terrible team with a lame duck coach, as you mentioned. Eli's coming back after being benched in week 2, and when they benched him, it was 2 years late of being 2 years late. The Eagles have won 9 of 10, 17 out of 21. They always beat them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, what kind of style points can you garner? Then add weather into the equation.
Well, that's what we were talking about. If they win 31-13 as opposed to 23-21, I feel like the people who are in the camp of, hey man, they control their own destiny, they can get into the playoffs, and when you get into the playoffs, anything can happen. They'll be pretty enthused and encouraged by a 31-13 win. But most people right now, John, I think are in the boat where they don't know what to expect from the Eagles on a daily basis. And even if they make the playoffs, I don't think a lot of people are really genuinely thinking that they can make some noise. And if they win just 23-21, I feel like that's just another reason to be like, man, I don't know about this team.
Yeah, I get it, and that's possible. From my standpoint, like I said, there's nothing they can really do. So all they have to do is win the game and just not lose to another bad team, and then you just kind of move forward. I think that's the goal, by hook or by crook. And I do think they're going to get it done rather easily. But I get it. I mean, that's the year they've had, and they've been so underachieving. So a lot of people don't know what to expect. And I've run across so many people that are scared to death of Eli Manning. I think the guy never beats them. How could you be scared of him? But
we'll ask you that same question tomorrow, John, at 4:00.
Yeah, well, I mean, but from Eagles fans' standpoint, I mean, what do they have to be scared of? What is there any history they need to be scared of?
I think that they're just scared of the Eagles.
Insert Miami. Yeah, I think it's more of the fear of their own team.
Well, and that's what I said. It's got more to do with the disappointment of the season, and so then you start talking yourself into things. And like, well, maybe Eli will give them some juice. Well, if Eli gives this New York Giants team some juice and they beat you tonight, it's the old, well, you don't deserve to make the playoffs. And, oh, by the way, you still might make the playoffs, which is the worst part because of the NFC East. But if you lose this game Yeah, you could throw everything out there and say this team is terrible, this team is awful, this team is done. Yeah, throw them all. Throw them all on the pile. Have a big bonfire. Because if they don't win this game, they stink.
I think there's a sound argument, which we debated all last week, that after the Miami game, you can make a strong case for that. But the next two games, John, going into the Dallas game, I think there's still an opportunity to feel different about this team. And everyone's different, but I'll just ask you. If Carson throws 4 touchdowns, and it's a lot of ifs, woulda, coulda, shoulda, if, maybe, we'll see. If Carson throws 4 touchdowns this week and next week, the offense looks different and consistent, 2 straight games doing it, I would imagine you'd feel a little bit better or a little bit reassured going into Dallas, besides the anything can happen, take?
Well, not me. I mean, maybe other people. I mean, if Carson throws 4 touchdowns with these receivers, I put him in the Hall of Fame each and every week. I mean, this is
there you go.
This group is so bad, and hopefully Zach Ertz is healthier this week, and hopefully he's not going to join the club. I mean, that's one of the issues. That's the one guy you can count on, and he had one of his worst games as a pro in Miami because of the injury and fighting through it. So hopefully he's back to normal. We'll see about Nelson Aguilar. Alshon Jeffrey had his probably best game of the season against the Dolphins, one of the few Eagles that played well for the most part. But we've seen enough of this offense to know they have some issues, and you see it all over the league. You saw it again with the Patriots. If you don't have weapons, it's tough to look good in this league. So if we're talking about style points, I don't think this team is getting many style points until they get weapons, and that's an off-season problem. They don't have enough weapons. That's the issue.
Yeah, and that's something Jeff and I talked about earlier in the show as well. So
the thing is, though, they scored 31 against Miami. On offense, it looked fairly nice, and I would have to think against this Giants team, you can reasonably expect 28 to 30 if you're playing well.
And I was going to insert the weather and what John thinks how that affects the game plan, if at all, what Doug's going to do.
Well, usually, when you have rain games, if anything, it's going to help the offense more than the defense as far as the old thought of, receivers know where they're going, defenders don't. So if you don't have the right cleats and you don't adjust in pregame and you start slipping all over, you might see some blown coverages. Wind is a bigger issue from an offensive standpoint. So maybe the biggest issue from an Eagles standpoint is Carson's ball security and the fact that he's been fumbling again recently. Maybe that is something you have to keep an eye on because slick football might make that more likely to happen than typically. But I think as long as the wind is okay, I don't think it affects what you do from a passing standpoint. And in some ways it can help you, especially playing at home. And in theory, the Eagles should have a better feel for Lincoln Financial Field than the Giants do.
So what do you make of the wide receiver situation? Aguilar has, the knee, I think, goes back to the end of the New England game, right? And then he's been able to play, and then he wasn't able to play, and he played against Miami, but now he might not be able to play tonight. Is it just flaring up at different times? What are you making of his knee?
Well, he didn't practice all week, and it's interesting because he seemed to make it through and actually, for his, at least for his season, played one of his better games, I think, against Miami as well. Mm-hmm. And I think, you just talked about it, Jeff, offensively, that had more to do with the Eagles' offense or the Dolphins' defense. I would argue it's the latter, the Dolphins' defense. Okay. So, but clearly he's fighting through, and the fact that he didn't play and didn't practice and is listed as questionable, that's one of those where if I'm the Eagles, I'm not all that concerned about, to be honest. That we've seen that sample size. We've seen that movie. Is Greg Ward going to be that much worse? Now, the issue is they didn't bring somebody up from the practice squad, so that could be a good indication that they think Nelson's going to be able to go. Doug also mentioned Josh Perkins, who's now up on the 53s at tight end, but he was a wide receiver in college at Washington, so they could get through it that way. But obviously, this is as it is currently put together. This is a heavy 12 personnel team, and you're going to see the 2 tight ends a lot again.
Yeah, Josh Perkins, obviously, who was on the team last year, early in the year, when the Eagles were having issues at wide receiver from a health standpoint. Now, Reuben Frank wrote an interesting article on CSNPhilly.com. Ryan and I were talking about it, and he pointed out the fact that it's not just Jordan Matthews, it's not just Darren Sproles. There's about 3 or 4 guys throughout the course of the year when the Eagles needed somebody to fill a roster spot. They kind of went, and now, Jay Ajayi being another, they kind of go back to the same well of guy that they already employed once before. And we were talking about, well, there's merits to when you need a guy on the fly, someone who knows your offense, someone who knows your defense and can get in there. But then there's also the idea of what's going on with your scouting department? Why do you have to bring in guys who keep getting cut or have been on the shelf for a year and you can't replenish with talent that can help you? Do you see both sides, or do you think it's more incriminating than it is more obvious what they've done?
Yeah, I don't like it. And I've been from early on. I don't understand, and I don't want to pick on Jordan Matthews because I think he did a lot of good things in his first go-round with this organization. But it was pretty clear how limited he was physically when they brought him back last year. Now they bring him back again, and it didn't work out. And you kind of saw Jay Ajayi last week. You didn't see the same explosion. So what are they looking at when they see these workouts? I do think it's an evaluation issue. And the second part is, and I've talked about this a lot as well, this coaching staff has a very, very difficult time in inserting players that can do only certain things. They want everybody to know the entire offense. And I don't like that. I don't think that's a way to succeed. Everybody in this league has to make do, whether it's through injuries, other forms of attrition, suspensions, what have you. There are times you have to play young players that only do certain things well. And to me, that's the definition of coaching. Accentuate the strengths of a player, mask as many deficiencies as possible. And I still think Doug is in a well above average coach in this league, but I've been disappointed. In fact, that would be my top disappointment of the Eagles as a whole, the way the offensive coaching staff has had trouble getting players up to speed, young players. And then the second part, being too comfortable, because I got to be honest with you. You can blame Howie Roseman. Maybe it's Howie Roseman. I don't think it is Howie Roseman. I think he's bringing back Jordan Matthews, Jay Ajayi. That's what the coaching staff wants. So I think that's a coaching staff problem.
I mean, that would make sense. Coaches definitely makes sense from rationalizing it. But, yeah, because coaches like guys for their scheme. They don't want to have to spend extra time in their limited practice minutes, trying to indoctrinate somebody new. But doesn't Howie then I guess he'd get painted as not a team player like Howie 1.0 if he were to say to Doug or to Jim, look, we can't keep going back with these guys. We have to bring in younger, newer, fresher, whatever talent, right? Because then it's there's a rift and these guys don't see eye to eye.
Well, yeah, you're probably going to get some of that, and you've already gotten some of that. And he did it once with Sendejo. He put his foot down and cut him at the deadline so they can get the compensatory pick back. Jim didn't want Andrew Sendejo cut, so he has put his foot down in the past, and he needs to put his foot down a little bit more when it comes to at least players like that. Because you see all over this league, young receivers, young running backs especially, who are able to come in and they have some juice. And, yeah, obviously they're not going to be great in pass protection. Obviously they're not going to be great as route runners. But they can run the football because they're young and because they're fast and because they're strong. And who knows? I mean, you go back to the Super Bowl season. I mean, Corey Clement was an undrafted free agent. He was the up back on the kickoff return team at the start of the season after working his way up. And by the end of the season, he's a Super Bowl hero. Did they learn nothing from that? I mean, sometimes you have to lean on younger players, especially when it's pretty evident you're not going to get anything from older players, whether it's through injury or just mileage or what have you. And I think the Eagles have done a bad job, and there's plenty of blame to go around.
No doubt. I know you, Mike, and Ryan, we've all been kind of very consistent with that all year, whether it's running back or wide receiver. What do you think the plan is at running back tonight? If Jordan Howard doesn't play and it looks like he's not, does Doug do the whole, well, all I have is Miles Sanders again thing, or do you think there's more carries for Jay Ajayi and Boston Scott?
Well, he said he wanted to get Jay a few more touches. I would go in the other direction. I would do all Miles Sanders all the time, just because I don't believe in Jay Ajayi. I don't believe in Boston Scott. But Doug is a slave to this committee. He always has been. It looks like he always will be. And he wants to get other people involved. And maybe it was just a bad afternoon for Jay, and maybe he'll show more. This is a more conducive atmosphere for running backs as far as maybe an ugly field. Maybe it turns into that type of game. And maybe between the tackles becomes more important. But hopefully they don't have him going off left tackle again, because let's leave that for Miles.
But this does go back to your point. You know what? Like Boston Scott, he may be young, he may make mistakes, but he's averaging 4.1 yards per carry. And he's a more explosive player at this point than Jay Ajayi, at least based on what we've seen. And to just make it Miles and then a smattering for either or, when this is a team that you can probably pound a little bit and run against, goes back to that stubbornness that you talked about.
Yeah, no question. And a lot of it has to do with pedigree as well. That's been an issue for this team, sort of relying on the higher draft pick or the guy who's done it before, as opposed to somebody who has come up, as Corey Clement, as I mentioned, during the Super Bowl season. And remember, Boston was picked up off the Saints practice squad, started this year on the practice squad. So there's not he's not in the purview of the coaching staff originally. And it becomes difficult to get an opportunity. And once you get an opportunity, you got to seize it. Like we talked about a little bit with Greg Ward. He did a little bit. I don't know if Boston did, and I think that's the bigger issue there.
All right, so what about a wide receiver? Because we only have 3, right? We've got, as you mentioned, Josh Perkins coming up. That's kind of 3.5, but you have Alshon Jeffrey, you got J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and you have Greg Ward. So obviously it's going to be a heavy 12 personnel game, I would think, but at some time he's going to want to go 11. It almost seems like the most important thing out of this is not just winning, but staying healthy, John.
Yeah, I mean, and Josh will. I mean, he's a flex tight end anyway, so he's sort of, and we talk about formations a lot. A lot of it is just how you classify players. When you have a hybrid player like that, it's essentially just a glorified wide receiver anyway. Mm-hmm. But I do think, the Eagles have 3 receivers on the practice squad. So, and they just brought back Mark and Michelle. So he was here throughout the summer and through training camp. They have Rob Davis. They have Marcus Green. So they have bodies at that position. I do think it might be a positive sign that Nelson may be able to go. And that's why they didn't make a move at wide receiver. Or, I mean, they play more 12 personnel than any other team in the league to begin with. And that is just going to tick up a little bit more today. But when you do have a player like Perkins, and even Ertz at times as a flex tight end, it is just sort of how you label things, because they're serving as receivers anyway.
Right.
And that's why Dallas Goedert is so important to this team as an inline tight end, because he can do a lot of different things with those personnel groupings.
John, before we get your prediction and maybe one key to the game here tonight, I just want your thoughts quickly on how Doug handled the week, having that day of pads when they don't typically have it, and then the leadership council not being informed, and some guys maybe a little bit upset about that. But what are your thoughts on just the week of preparation and how he's handled that? Because we talked a lot about him, after the loss in Miami.
Well, he didn't frame it that way, but make no mistake, it was a message to the team and coming off a horrible loss to a really bad football team. So typically he does run it. You have 11 practices in the first 11 weeks you can put in pads, and then over the final 6 weeks you only have 3. So he claims that this was preordained because they had the extra day. And he was going to do it anyway. But typically he would tell that leadership council. He did not. Now, what a team source told me is that he felt it was the time for talking was over. And he didn't care what they thought. He was going to put them in pads. And that to me says message. So I don't think there's any question he was trying to tell this team, look, sense of urgency has got to ramp up. I know the division is bad. I know you're not going to be out of it even if you lose to another horrible team. But there's also a chance you can beat this team. You can beat the Redskins. You can beat the Cowboys. And your NFC East champions in Week 17 doesn't mean anything, because I think it's very likely that the Cowboys might lose to the Los Angeles Rams. So the time is here. There's no more opportunities for mulligans. There's just, this is it.
All right, Johnny, before we get you out of here, how about a key to the game and then your score prediction?
My key to the game is showing up because the weather is bad and the Eagles will win 30-13.
All right.
Ooh, a rout.
30-13. Well, that's the score that I felt might make some people who are on that, oh, they control their own destiny, we can do that. They'll be happy with that.
Say it like that,
They'll be very happy with that.
Yeah, I'm not going to be happy with anything because this is a bad football team.
There we go.
Well, you'll be happy to see me in 3 hours, my friend.
Yeah, you might not see me for 3.5 because I got to go to Glassboro first, and then I got to go to the game.
All right,
Oh,
so
boy.
you will be on Countdown to Kickoff following the Sports Bash tonight with Krause, McMullen. I hear the Schweiner is making another appearance. Is that accurate?
I think it's accurate. So
Oh,
that's
boy.
exciting.
Get your popcorn ready.
Well, I've got some must-listen radio for my drive up to the
Get your pom-poms ready. Schweimer's going to be there.
Yeah, all right. Well, we'll see you there. Thanks for Johnny. We'll talk to you. I'll see you when I get there, bud.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, guys.